that whatever is said at this meeting, either by me or any other speaker, expresses our own individual opinion as of today.
Morning, I'm Kayleigh, I'm an alcoholic.
Okay.
Yeah, no, I'm very nervous. So I'll just kind of start at the beginning. I was born into a pretty normal, what I think was normal, very loving home. My mom and dad are still together after 40 years, and I had an older brother and I have an older sister, and I wanted for nothing growing up my whole life. There was always lots of love, and tried very hard to put down boundaries. And I remember quite clearly from about the age of 7 sort of just starting to bat that stuff away, and it came for me the most in religious stuff. I would toe the line because my family were Christian, quite orthodox, and I would toe the line because it got me what I wanted, but I never believed, and I quite quietly began to rebel against that stuff, and that just carried on, and from about the age of 11, 12, my home life started to get a bit rocky because my brother was an addict, and a heroin addict, and to be perfectly honest, that stuff didn't really bother me in terms of fear for him or anything, because from then up until when he died, I used that to do what I wanted to do, to kind of go under the radar because my parents were busy with him, and that just really carried on, and I always I did well at school and stuff because I felt that if I could control that stuff, then I deserved to do everything I wanted to do outside of school, and I did, I did. I started blackout drinking when I was 14, and from 14 to the age of 27, when I came into treatment, I did that basically every weekend, unless I was in treatment. And it was never a case of a build-up for me. When I started drinking, I drank till I got sick, and I refused to take any responsibility for anything that I did. As far as I was concerned, it was always somebody else's fault, and that just carried me through. I remember the first time that my father had to come and pick me up. I was 14, from a party that I'd gone to, and I was incoherent. And the next morning, he said to me, "I can't do this with you and your brother. I can't. Something's got to give." And it went right over the top of my head. Such was the level of my selfishness that stuff just didn't bother me. It just didn't bother me. It was just because in my mind, in my arrogance, and I've always been an incredibly arrogant person, I was not like him. I was not addicted to illegal drugs. I was not on the streets, and I wasn't stealing. The fact that I was taking all the money from my father that I could possibly get my hands on and my mother didn't enter my mind. I insulated myself but I'm doing well at school, and as I got older, but I have a degree, but I have a good job, I have all these things, and besides the fact that the job was with my father because I was unemployable and spent most of my time walking into things, was not the point. That's what I insulated myself with, so I was special and different to the type of addict that my brother was. It was just really extreme arrogance. I'm sorry if I kind of jump back and forth. And by the time I was 18, I had fallen pregnant, and everybody had urged me to not keep the baby, and I did it not because I was honorable or because I was moral or anything like that, because I necessarily had a conscience around that stuff. I was just unwilling to put myself through the trauma of a termination. And so what I did in my selfishness was bring a child into the world that I was unwilling and incapable of looking after. And that remained for the first 8 years of his life. I did not look after him, I did not take responsibility for him, and yet another thing fell to my parents. They raised my child, because after that I got married, and again, everybody urged me, don't do it, it's not going to work. I was 19, it was never going to work. And by that time, along with the alcohol, I had picked up substance abuse problems as well, and this was the life that I brought my son into. And I had manipulated my parents to such a degree that they were kind of like, well, you deserve a youth, you know, you need a youth, like, we'll just look after Neelan. And I ran with that. I just took it and I ran with it. I never took an ounce of financial, emotional, spiritual, physical responsibility for my child. And that was really fine for me, you know, because I detached from everything to the point where all that stuff was happening outside of me, and I could just drink and use, you know, and that was perfect. And I can use all kinds of big words for it or whatever, but basically what I was just very, very selfish, and uncaring, and compassionate, and quite okay with watching my family sort of crumble because of not only my brother's addiction but mine too, you know, because I still firmly believed in my heart that I was different to him. And I just kind of stayed that delusional throughout everything. And like everybody said, the marriage did fail, and that was perfect for me because, again, I could use it to not take responsibility. I could say, the marriage has failed, it's not my stuff, it's all him. And my family believed that because throughout the marriage I had told them these awful stories of abuse and this and that, but not my part, not what I had done, not how I had kind of instigated those situations. So in their mind, my ex-husband was the devil and I was the victim. And that was perfect for me because I could use on that. And I did. I left my son with my parents and I went out, and, you know, after I got divorced, then all the relationship stuff came, and I just carried on and on and on with men and drugs and alcohol, and I just really didn't care, you know. It just started picking up speed. And I went into treatment for the first time when I was 21. And I didn't, if you had asked me then, I would have said to you that I went into treatment to get clean. But I didn't. I went into treatment because I couldn't juggle the balls anymore. And to get my family off my back a bit. And I went into a psych ward, not really treatment, a psych ward. And I kind of detoxed for 3 weeks and came out with like a psychologist and a bag of meds and a boyfriend. And I continued on with that. Every time subsequently that I went into treatment, or try to get clean, I left exactly the same person with the boyfriend, you know. And like throughout this entire period, from when I started going into treatments in 21 till when I came into the house on the hill at 27, there were absolutely no consequences for my behavior. There were just no consequences for me to bear. The consequences were borne exclusively by my family. I refused to take responsibility because it was never my fault, and it was always somebody else's fault. And kind of during all this time that I went in and out of treatment, my brother died of an overdose. And being the alcoholic that I am, I used that. You know, I used that. I knew that my parents didn't want me to go the same way. So when things got too tough for me, when I didn't necessarily want to stop, but I needed the heat off, I would go to them and say, look, I don't want to end up like Jabin. Please, can you help me? Like, it's disgusting when I look back on it now, but that's how I was. And I used it, but I was not above when he was detoxing, stealing his detox meds. I wasn't above watching him cold turkey so that I could be high. I wasn't above that stuff. You know, I try to help him and whatever, but there was never any good intention in that. I try to help him because then I could turn it around and say, oh, but, you know, the pressure's too much for me, you know, that's why I'm using. Like, I was just super manipulative and selfish and cared only about myself, you know. And coupled with, like, the extreme arrogance was this kind of inferiority that I had created this picture of myself that didn't exist. And I would become anything I needed to become to get what I wanted. Because God forbid people ever saw me for what I really was, which was basically just a lush, you know, that would take what I could from people and walk away. So yeah, so then my brother passed away, and I continued like the disrespect and the selfishness, and I was high and drunk at his funeral, and my parents' grief didn't enter my mind. It just didn't enter my mind. I just carried on, you know, and the treatment just carried on. I kept going in and out, and I had periods of clean time, you know, what I thought was clean time. And I remember, 4 years ago, finding the rooms for the first time and getting a sponsor and working the steps and whatever, and actually doing a 1-year share. And I'm mortified when I think back of what I said in that 1-year share, because I had no idea what this program was about, no idea about anything, because all the time that I was using and trying to get clean, I thought that drugs and alcohol were the problem. I was fine and I was the victim, and if the drugs and alcohol were taken away, I was going to be okay. And I only learned that that's not the case when I came into the house on the hill. And yeah, you know, I continued to relapse, and my family continued to pick up the pieces, because God forbid I die like my brother did. And I used that. I just used it, and I used it, and I used it. And I threw their kindness and their love in their faces every step of the way. And throughout all of this, my son grew up without a mother, and yeah, he's quite damaged as a result of that. He didn't really know where he belonged, and yeah, I just carried on with that. And I worked for my father, so he continuously had egg on his face because of the way I behaved at work, and he kept taking me back. And he didn't take me back because I was good at my job or I added something to his company. He took me back because I think he knew that I would just never find a job anywhere else, because I was not capable of working, you know. So I earned a really good salary and I had all these perks for a job that I didn't do. And that was my father in a nutshell. He would enable me into the ground, you know, because he loves me and he doesn't know he's doing anything wrong. And I never told him that he did do anything wrong, because it served me to have the money and the job and the car and the house and everything all paid for by my father. Didn't work for it, didn't earn it, didn't deserve it, was where it stood. And yeah, that just pretty much carried on. And I went into treatment last year in February at a place in Gauteng, and I ran away because it was a 12-step treatment center, and they took it very seriously. They took it really, really seriously, and I was not going to have that. So I walked out. And throughout the using, I could maintain for a year, then I could maintain for 8 months, 6 months, 2 months, a month, and my last relapse I lasted a weekend. And I was back in treatment the Monday night. And I had called up to the house on the hill, and I was like, look, you know, and I was off my face when I did it, because once again, I didn't really think I needed to come into treatment. And they said, well, just come in. And I remember sitting in front of my mom and my dad, just begging them to just buy me kind of one more hit, just so that I could go in, which is like pretty, like, it's terrible, because my dad was crying and my mom was broken and finished, and I was just sitting there begging to get high just one last time. And that's me in a nutshell. I just didn't care at all about other people. So I came into treatment, and I didn't know it at the time, but I was in for quite a shock. Thanks. In my, into first kind of sit down with my counsellor, she said to me, what's different now? And I was like, I don't know, because I didn't care and I didn't want to be there. And she was like, you know, well, are you going to stay? And I was like, yeah, I mean, I'll stay, but it's not like my parents are going to make me, you know. Wow, boy, was I so very wrong. And I remember her just looking at me, and, you know, I was so delusional and so arrogant. You know, I didn't come in with willingness or desperation or any of those things. I came in once again to get the heat off, but I had miscalculated where I was coming into treatment. And yeah, I got my reality for the first time in my life story. And it was kind of like, well, house gone, car gone, job gone. Your child calls your mom and dad. He doesn't miss you, he doesn't ask about you, and he says you don't care about him, which was my son summing me up, because I didn't care about him. That's what my actions proved. And my counsellor also said to me, well, you've got a choice. You can stay in treatments, or you can be sectioned and go to jail. That's it. And that had never been something that had been said to me, because throughout years and years of active addiction, I had never been arrested and I had never gone to jail. And I had never spent a night on the street, not because of my actions, but because the consequences were borne by my family. I had had loads of car accidents with my son in the car because I was high or drunk. I had done all that stuff, and my father would just pick up the pieces, put it in a nice parcel, and sort it out. So for the first time in 13 odd years of active addiction, I got a taste of consequences, and I didn't like it. And honestly, I'd come into treatment thinking I can comply for 3 months, and I can go out and do whatever it is that I want to do. Go back to the job that I don't deserve, and the house that isn't really mine, and the car and whatever. This nice little package that I'd created for myself, that none of it was mine and none of it was deserved. And so I got my first taste of reality, and I still complied. I still complied, and I complied, and I complied, and then I hit what I thought was my rock bottom in concern group. And I was scared of concern groups, but where it's at for me is that specific concern group saved my life, because it showed me exactly what I am. After 4.5 months of treatment, I was the same person that had walked in, just without the drugs and alcohol. Absolutely nothing had changed. Fearful, paranoid, dishonest, manipulative, arrogant, angry. It was all just in there. By that time, I had finished my 12 steps, done a 4 and 5, been in the house after that for a month, and nothing had changed, And what happened in that concern group was my pain became enough, not other people's, because I didn't care about theirs. My pain became enough for me to begin to change, to begin to open myself up to a relationship with a higher power, because I battered that stuff away as well. I sat in that spiritual group, and I didn't put my hand up to fight, but I fought in my head. And I was like, I will not be challenged. My views will not be challenged. And that's, just really, really arrogant in how I was, And so I had to do a 12-step assignments and start from the beginning, and that whole situation was not without self-pity and me feeling sorry for myself and whatever, and crying and all that shit. And and then things started to change for me. There were consequences from my behavior, but I finally began to see what I'd done to other people, and I finally opened up and listened in shares, listened to what this program could do for people who had nothing. And I slowly began to try to develop a relationship with a higher power. I call him God. That's my stuff. Slowly began to listen in the spiritual groups, and I did still fight. And I still had to make amends for that stuff, because I did still fight, because I am still very, very arrogant. But the change began to happen, and I put in the action to the best of my ability, but God did the rest. It was God that did the rest, and so I carried on. And the first time my family came to visit me prior to that big concern, I was taken out for the day and brought back in the evening, taken out for the day, brought back in the evening, because of the way I'd behaved in treatment prior to that. I had always used. I'd always just found a way to use. And the second time my family came to visit me, I got to go out for a whole weekend, and it was beautiful. And I began to, with the suggestions of my sponsor, my counselor, build a relationship with my son. Call him when I said I was going to call him, because by that time I had some little privileges. I went out every now and then, and I got to text my son, and when I said I was going to text him, I texted him. When I said I was going to call him, I called him. And when he came for the first time, I made it about him. And our relationship began to change. And where things had always been, I want to go live with my father, he said, I don't want to live with my father, I want to live with you. And I had to tell him, I want to live with you as well, but I have to do this first. And the links for me in recovery have always come around my son. Because where in the beginning, he didn't want to have anything to do with me, he wants me to be his mom now. And at this point, I'm not in a position to do that. I still have a lot of work to do. But that stuff continued to change. By November last year, I got to go out because my parents asked me, because I wasn't allowed to ask to visit them. That was the boundary they set down, and I adhered to it. And they said, please, can you come visit us? And I went to visit them for a month. And again, it was beautiful. It was an absolutely incredible time. Not without hiccups, not without me acting out and having to work my program around that stuff and calling my sponsor in a mess, and not without any of that stuff. But our relationship had changed. My family had begun, and I'm privileged that they had begun to trust me. And I had been in a position at that time to not take advantage of that trust because of this program. Because for the first time in my life, I had connected to what I had done to my family, and I tried to change that. And I came back into treatment after a month, and then I had to look for a job. And I found a job after being back in the house for a month. And there's a lot of stuff around that as well. A lot of stuff around the job and working, because it was already new, never worked for anyone that wasn't my dad. So I people pleased for 3 months, and I'm sitting with that consequence again of doing that. There's still stuff with my family because of my behavior, because of the way I still act out on my defects. But there's things that I've carried with me through treatment that I still do every day. I still call my son when I say I'm going to call him. I still text him when I say I'm going to text him. I still do step 11s as thoroughly as I possibly can. If I have to call my sponsor on Monday, Wednesday, Saturday, I call my sponsor Monday, Wednesday, Saturday. I still get on my knees, bring it on and thank you for a perfect day. And I say some other stuff and pray for, guidance and faith and, but I still do that stuff, and I still know in my behavior after all of this stuff that the problem is me, because I can still act like a raving lunatic without drugs, and I do often, I really do. But the fact of the matter is, when I look at what my life was like a year ago to what it's like today, I can't compare the two, because this program didn't give me my life back. It gave me something unrecognizable. It gave me something absolutely unrecognizable to the life that I had in active addiction. And that's not me. That's God and this fellowship and this program. Because I was never ready and I was never willing. And God finally gave me the desperation and the willingness to do what I needed to do. And I stayed in treatment. I stayed in treatment for 11 months. And at some points I was kicking and screaming. I was like, I don't want to do this anymore. I can't do this anymore. I want out. And I just didn't want to do it. But I stayed. I stayed the course because I was told to stay the course. And I did. And along the way, I made friendships with people that I'm still friends with, and I treasure those friendships every day, because I never had that before. I never had friends. I was never someone that could be relied upon for anything, and I didn't rely on others because I was self-reliant, and it wasn't like I'm nice and independent. I just didn't rely on other people and did things my own way, and to hell with the consequences, and to hell with who I hurt, But that's not what I found when I came into recovery. I found friendships with women, which was very important to me, because I like to be friends with men, not because of any other reason than they're easier to manipulate than women are, and they don't see through me. So what I had to do was make friends with women, and I did. And I treasure the friendships with the women that I have in recovery today, because my family's far away. And I know that any time I can turn to these people, and I know that they can turn to me as well, and I'll be there, to the best of my ability. I'll be there. I was quite rosy-eyed when I left the house, thinking like everything's just going to be moonshine and roses, and I had a pink cloud for about 36 hours, and then life happened, and it's just been cutting me off at the knees ever since. But I have grown so much. I've gotten so much growth in this 1 month that I've been out of treatment. It's been incredible, because this was real life and responsibility and work and my child and my family and all of it. But in that period, never did I go through a situation where I thought, I want to drink and use because I can't do this. I did go through periods where I shouted at my sponsor, which was not ideal. But yeah, I didn't quit my job or shout at my family or anything, and I've continued to try to work the program, and it's never perfect. It's just to the best of my ability, you know, and yeah, like by God's grace, I made it this far, you know, and I'm incredibly grateful to be sitting here, incredibly grateful, because I didn't think that I'd ever really get to this point. I had given up hope a very long time ago, and basically what it comes down to for me is that the house on the hill and the people in the house on the hill and this program ended up saving my life. And I tried to put the action in and stuff, but quite separately and apart from that was that what I found in that house, the pure unadulterated program, and more than that, the love, which was not always the love that I wanted. I don't want that kind of love always. I want a different kind of love that's soft and squishy, and I don't get that because I don't need it. It saved my life. You know, it saved my life. And the only thing that I can try to do is give that back to the best of my ability. So yes, I'm very, very grateful to be sitting here. Very grateful for the gifts, you know, that I have, for the relationship I have with my family and with my son. And again, it's not always perfect, but it's very different from what it was before. So yeah, thanks for letting me share.